Welcome to National Pension Partners, where retirement planning meets peace of mind. Today, we're diving into the 412(e)(3) plan, also known as a fully insured pension plan. This isn't just any retirement plan. It's the gold standard for stability and guaranteed benefits. How does it work? Simple. It's funded exclusively by life insurance and annuity contracts. This means no market risks, no actuarial assumptions, just ironclad guarantees. Think of it like this. You're a small business owner who hates surprises. The 412(e)(3) plan gives you predictable, stable contributions every year. Your future benefits are backed by insurance contracts, so you know exactly what you're getting. No guesswork, no headaches. But there's more. These plans are designed to maximize your contributions and offer significant tax advantages. And with National Pension Partners, you're not just getting a plan, you're getting a team of experts, attorneys, CPAs, actuaries, all dedicated to making your retirement as secure as possible. We provide personalized consulting, ensuring that your plan is tailored to your specific needs. Best part, initial consultations and proposals are absolutely free. $0, zero commitment. So if you want a retirement plan that's as reliable as your morning coffee, head over to nationalpensions.com. With the 412(e)(3) plan, your future is in safe hands. Retirement planning never sounded so thrilling. Perfect for small business owners who like their finances as predictable as Monday mornings. Stable contributions, ironclad guarantees, and serious tax advantages. It's the trifecta of financial security. And with National Pension Partners, you get a team of brainiacs, attorneys, CPAs, actuaries, ensuring your retirement is as secure as Fort Knox. Oh, did we mention the free consultations? That's right. You get a personalized expert proposal with $0 down. So, if you want a retirement plan that's as reliable as your morning coffee, head over to nationalpensions.com. Because when it comes to your future, boring is the new exciting. Retirement planning never sounded so thrilling. For more details, check out National Pension Partners at nationalpensions.com. Retirement planning never sounded so thrilling.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your host, moderator for today's show. And today we actually have a really very exciting topic. It's topics: jobs, the U.S. dollar, and the Federal Reserve. They're all intertwined. When the job report came down, the U.S. dollar slid. And of course, the Federal Reserve did what they usually do: nothing. So with that, we're going to bring in the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, to make sense of the senseless, which is the economy in the United States of America. So David, I don't know if you saw, the jobs report was revised. The head of the BLS was fired. Maybe the jobs report wasn't what they wanted. And then, of course, the US dollar slid because the European against the EU, because the European Union was thinking, well, maybe US isn't that strong. And then the Federal Reserve does what they usually do: nothing. So with that, if you can make sense of the senseless and help our viewers out, we certainly would appreciate it.
Well, first, let's talk about what the Federal Reserve is supposed to be focused on. The Federal Reserve really has three things that it's to focus on under current law. First is to have a moderate degree of inflation. In other words, to make sure that it's modest, and their target is 2%. And right now, for the latest month, inflation was 2.7%, which is down significantly from the peak of 9.1 in June of 2022, and down from the beginning of the year, but still above their target. Secondly, they're supposed to promote macroeconomic growth. The latest numbers with regard to economic growth: for the first quarter, there was a contraction of 0.5%. For the second quarter ending ending June 30, there was an increase of 3% for that quarter. So an average for the first 6 months of 1.25%. And thirdly, they're supposed to promote full employment. The employment numbers went up slightly as a result of the jobs report. I think 4.2% unemployment, which is still low, but when you lift the hood, you find out that we don't have enough of certain kinds of people, and we have more than we need of other kinds of people, and there's still more jobs available than there are people to fill the jobs that have the different skills necessary to fill the jobs. I think one of the reasons that people got upset was the degree of the adjustment. I mean, there was a huge adjustment downward. I used to be Assistant Secretary of Labor for pensions and employee benefit programs, which and the head of BLS is an Assistant Secretary level person. And so I dealt with, the BLS people, and they tend to be professional statisticians. They tend to be, nonpartisan. It's hard for me to believe that the head of BLS would be trying to do something to help or hurt a particular president on a partisan basis. But I will tell you that when you get those big of adjustments, it does tell you may need to look at the process and find out what's going on that would cause that big of an adjustment. Now, the president has been putting a lot of pressure on the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, to reduce interest rates because, he believes that rates are too high. He believes that Powell waited too long to raise interest rates when we started seeing excess inflation. And he's right. He did wait too long. He now believes that he's waiting too long to reduce interest rates. At the same point in time, you've got a little bit of a mixed message. I mean, inflation's a little bit above target. Growth was positive by 3%. Employment is, unemployment is relatively low at 4.2%. And Powell is saying that his biggest concern is the uncertainty associated with the tariff situation. And whether and to what extent the higher tariffs will end up resulting in additional inflation. And so he's kind of taken a wait and see attitude. The Fed generally meets about every 3 months to determine whether and to what extent there ought to be an adjustment in interest rates. They could meet off cycle, but they typically don't. The latest Fed meeting resulted in maintaining interest rates where they are, 4.25 to 4.5%. Interest rates obviously are of concern from a variety of perspectives, one of which the federal government has over $30 trillion in debt. And so for every, for every 1%, in interest rates, you're talking about real money, a difference in the interest rate. And it's the fastest growing expense in the government. In addition, the rate that's set for the 10-year which is a market-based rate, but it does have some, the Fed rates have some impact on that, at least indirectly. That also has an impact on, borrowing in other areas, in particular with regard to mortgage loans. And that can have an impact on the housing market, on the impact of the ability of people to be able to buy a home, or the willingness and ability of people to be willing to move because of the difference between the rate that they have on their current home and the rate they may have to have on their new home if they can't afford to pay cash, and most people can't. So we're in a situation today where we've got relatively low inflation, but still higher than what the Fed target is, and uncertainty because of tariffs. We've got good economic growth for the second quarter, but again, we had a contraction for the first, and we don't know what the future holds. Most economists don't think we'll have a recession, but there's a significant difference of opinion as to what growth is likely to be until the tariff situation gets resolved. And then our employment situation is one that we have to look and see what's going to end up being the impact, not just on economic growth, but what's going to be the impact of other forces such as AI, artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence is going to cost some people their jobs, and it's going to create new opportunities. And we're still in the very early stages to understand how that's all going to play out. So those are just a few opening thoughts, and maybe we can open it up and have an exchange with some of our guests.
Yeah, we have a lot of artificial intelligence on this network, and I want to bring some of them in right now. We're going to bring in Dr. Sharif from Bangladesh. He's an expert and very much artificially intelligent. Then we have Sasha Starr, who's a chess expert and runs a couple of our TV shows, and he's artificial intelligent. Of course, today we have Steve Rao, who's joining us from the Raleigh-Durham area, where his candidate, Mr. Wiley, has taken a back seat to, I think, Cooper, and will not be running for this U.S. Senate. So maybe you can update us a little bit on the politics of North Carolina.
Absolutely. Real quickly, I always like to come in and see David Walker, who's also supporting me to be the next commissioner for Wake County. David, it's always a pleasure, and a lot to unpack here in 20 minutes. But yeah, real quickly, on the ground in North Carolina, all eyes on Roy Cooper, our former governor, who is now the front runner for the nominee for the Democratic Party for the U.S. Senate against Tillis' open seat. Looks like Michael Whately, who's been endorsed by the president. Many of us predict Cooper will win the race, most likely, but you never say never. I think it's going to be a good year for Democrats in the Senate and the House. And that's all we can see right now. I mean, but of course, and I think David Walker brought up some good points. We are seeing kind of a tough economy here across in North Carolina. Housing prices continue to be high, grocery prices, gas prices, transportation, logistics costs. Really not seeing any signs of a positive economy. Of course, the national debt, as David reminds us, doesn't help at all. So I think that's really the challenge for the Democrats, is they have to really get back on message and what can they do differently to turn this economy around. Protests are good. I attend a lot. I attend a lot of rallies, the No Kings protests, but protests only get you so far. The Democrats, I think, need solutions, and I think only time will tell whether they can find the right solutions to get, gain seats in the House and Senate. But I'm still a bit of a skeptic on whether they can win the presidency back. Anyway, that's just my take on it. I'd love to get David's take on it.
My view is the only way that the Democrats have a chance at taking the presidency in 2028 is if they learn from the past. And by that, I mean Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a moderate Democrat governor. I think governors are clearly in a better position to run for president because they're the chief executive officer for their state. There's a huge difference between being a legislator and being a CEO, which is what governors are. And I think if you look to states like Pennsylvania and Kentucky, which are either purple states or red states, where you have a Democratic governor who is popular and who has been effective. I think if you end up, I'm not saying he's the only one. I mean, you might argue that Cooper might be one. But the simple fact is, I think, a proven governor from a red or purple state it gives the Democrats the best chance to win. The challenge Democrats have, I believe, is the energy in the party is on the left, and it's with personalities. For example, look at New York City. The guy who is, the Democratic nominee for mayor. And keep in mind that New York City has more population than 38 states in the union, okay? And the guy who's going to be the Democratic nominee, and I won't mention his name, has zero executive experience at any level, at any sector of the economy, and is far left of the quote unquote sensible center in the country. So I just, the Democrats need to. I think
that's a good point. Before I hand it back to you, and I'd just love to come in and listen to your insight of what I tweet today. But you never know. I mean, the way I look at it, if Cooper does win the U.S. Senate seat, he would put himself in position for perhaps a run for the presidency, or perhaps a seat on the vice presidential ticket. Yeah. One name that I have heard is Governor Andy Beshear, whom I know personally through my work, the governor of Kentucky. There are similarities between Beshear and Clinton. He is a Democratic governor in a Trump red state. He's won 2 consecutive terms. He's young, dynamic, good-looking guy. and you never know. But I think with Cooper, he's too sharp of a guy. There must be a reason. I don't think Roy Cooper wants to be in the Senate until he's 78 years old. There has to be a reason why he ran, because if he does become a U.S. senator, he would have had the gubernatorial experience and would be a junior U.S. senator. But just like John Edwards was in the Senate for 2 years and ran for the White House.
Well, my personal opinion is that Andy Beshear and I guess Josh Shapiro,
Yes.
who is Pennsylvania, they're, as of today, I think they're the two best candidates the Democrats have for potential presidential race in 2028. But of course, we got the midterms in November of 2026, and that's what everybody's focused on right now. And we have a lot of controversy because of redistricting efforts, in particular with regard to Texas. But they're not the only state that's engaged in gerrymandering, I can assure you. Yeah.
Dr. Sharif from Benjamin.
Thank you. Professor David, I have 3 questions for you. Very specifically, Bangladesh get 20% tariff, but our garments industry has to pay 37% tariff if we want to go to USA and do our garments related business. If you have some advice, how strategically the garment industries can do business with USA. Secondly, I want to bring another important issues. It may definitely engage with US interest. Presently in South Asia, especially in India, we are observing currency and trade pressure from USA. A strong US dollar and anticipated political pressure on the federals have placed depreciation pressure on Indian rupees, which recently traded near 87.454 rupees per dollar, a near 1.2% drop, promoting RBI sweep trades and potential intervention to stabilize it. So emerging Asian currency broadly weakened because of these tariffs and all of the political pressures. And in terms of macro outcome, we are observing in South Asia growth is expected to slow 5.8% in 2025 and 6%. So what's your thoughts? Like USA has very good trade relations with India, with South Asia. On the other hand, USA has very good competitions with China because China is rising with his Belt and Road Initiative. With all of the initiative of Donald Trump, do you believe USA also losing South Asia or specifically Indian market? And final things about artificial intelligence. No, I'm a big fan of wisdom. So we are developing wisdom apps like Kokoro. Let's say Honorable David Walker, Nick Palveda, Steve Rao, Sasha, you have your own wisdom. It's better than artificial intelligence with USA, definitely with the California Institute of Management and all of the famous scientists, let's say Professor Fred Philip, Professor Julians, with Japan, and definitely I'm part of these teams, Dr. Yamanaka, part of these things. Do you believe USA also focus on this human use wisdom, and they should more invest on human capital development? Thank you. I have 3 points.
All right. First, what is the rate? What is the tariff rate that you're supposed to have for Bangladesh? I didn't really understand. What's the current state of affairs?
Right now, 20%, but we have to pay 37%. Previously, 16 to 70%, and right now it's add another 20% for Bangladesh. So 37% we have to pay if we want to go to USA. And it's very much.
So you don't. So let me just make sure I understand. So first, you don't have an agreement with the U.S., and basically that's the letter you got that said since you don't have an agreement with the U.S., you're going to have to pay 37%. Is that correct?
We have agreement. After the agreements, we have to pay 37%. Previously, we have to pay, let's say, 30 plus 17, 47%. Now we have to pay 37%.
So it's down 10%.
Yes.
So you're better than you were.
Definitely, but I think that for garments industry, it's almost impossible. Even for USA, it's 25%. Definitely, India, it's 25%. Definitely, it's very big pressure for India.
All right. Well, first, understand that Trump is not a traditional president, and he's not a traditional president with regard to tariffs in particular, because he's a big advocate for tariffs. He looks at it for several different reasons. He looks at it to try to be able to promote domestic production, although we're not going to be competitive with regard to textiles. I mean, we need to be competitive and to be self-sufficient, either with ourselves and or in cooperation with our allies for national security and public health issues. But beyond that, you want to make sure that you've got fair trade arrangements, and you don't want to try to be competing in industries that you realistically can't compete in. We can't compete in textiles, okay? And it's not a national security issue. It's not a public health issue. But Trump tries to use tariffs to achieve other ends. Trump tries to use tariffs to be able to get more investment in the United States, which means more production in the United States. Trump tries to use tariffs in order to promote domestic jobs, build things here rather than build them elsewhere. Trump he tries to use tariffs to achieve other things, such as peace agreements, ceasefires, etc. Trump tries to use tariffs to achieve, advantages for the U.S. and disadvantages for adversaries. For example, he tries to use it to make sure that people aren't buying energy from Russia and from Iran, and he tries to use that as leverage. I mean, the U.S. is, by far, the U.S. is the largest economy in the world on nominal dollars. It's a big consumption, so a lot of people want access to U.S. markets. China is bigger based on purchasing power parity, but we're the biggest on nominal dollars. I think, India is a real question mark. We don't have an agreement with India yet. That's one of the biggest outstanding issues, is what's going to happen with India. I would argue that India is of strategic importance. But one of the concerns with regard to India is helping Russia through significant purchases of Russian oil. And one of the things that Trump is trying to do is to try to get a ceasefire going between Russia and Ukraine, which ultimately might lead to some kind of an agreement. And he's trying to use this tariff situation, not just with India, but also with China, to see if he can get them to, reduce their purchases of Russian oil. Whether or not they'll be successful or not, I don't know. On the issue of the dollar, actually the dollar has gone down this year.
Yeah, I know that. Oh, by the way, Sheriff, you may want to check, because it looks like August 1st, the tariffs just went down to 20% on Bangladesh. So
Yeah.
go take a look. It looks like they had a breakthrough in negotiations. And so now you're in line with Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Cambodia. The one that's higher than you is India at 25%.
Yes.
So
I want to thank David for being with us. I have to leave. Thank you, David. I'll be in touch.
Okay, take care, Steve.
we'll see, Steve.
If you were at 47 and now you're in 20, sounds like you're making progress. But in any event,
Hey, David, just really quickly, just to make a correction on something you just said, because we talked about it on the news recently, the shows before us. India just recently bought some crude from the U.S. So India just recently did that. I think it was yesterday or today. So they did buy a significant amount of crude oil from the U.S. and everything like that. So there has been that development that has taken place in the last day or two.
well, that's good, but that doesn't mean they're not buying oil from Russia. Okay?
That is true.
And that doesn't mean they're not buying oil from Iran. Okay.
That is true.
That's right. Okay. But again, as I said, Trump is not just looking, the last thing that he's looking at tariffs for, I apologize, is revenue. And depending upon what the final tariff rates might be on average, you're probably going to get 300 billion to 600 billion a year in additional revenues above and beyond what historically we've gotten. At the same point in time, the question is, what impact is that going to have on prices? At the same point in time, we got to keep in mind we're running deficits of close to $2 trillion a year. So while another 300 to 600 billion in revenue helps, It doesn't come close to solving our financial challenge. Okay. On the AI, look, Doctor, my view is that we need to develop a comprehensive human capital strategy in the United States. Okay. AI is just a piece of the puzzle. Okay. I mean, the comprehensive human capital strategies, what do we need to promote economic growth and individual opportunity? What do we need to do to be competitive on a global basis? A comprehensive human capital strategy includes many elements, including our education system, our immigration system, our training and retraining. There are just so many different elements. And I hate to say it, but, I've said it before. We've been in business since 1789. We still don't have a plan, and you don't want to rush into anything, but I would argue, it's been enough time.
That would be true. We'll go to our neighbors in the north in Canada, one of our favorite trading partners, and see what developments up there.
Yeah, Canada, north of the border.
Okay, it's quite interesting development is that Canada just pulled out of so-called negotiations with the United States. The reason being is it all depends on the will of one man, Donald Trump. So he wants to put 5% or 15% or 25 or 35 or 55% of Canadian goods. How does it affect Canada? It doesn't at all, because all these percentages will be borne by either U.S. taxpayer or U.S. importer. So they have to figure out who is going to pay what. The 15% or 35%, whatever, will not come out of the thin air. They have to be paid by somebody. So that somebody, in first case, okay, it's U.S. taxpayer. What that can create two things. That each American family will have to spend extra $1,000 to $2,000 annually, and also it will create even more inflation. Now, if it's paid by U.S. importers or car manufacturers or whoever using Canadian products, so in this situation, they will have to cover themselves this or part of this, the tariffs. So that will hurt investors in their, because it will come out of the profits. Now, if that's not enough, then they simply will have to let consumers absorb this. And at the beginning, several months ago, when a few food retailers, like I think Target and Walmart, once these certain tariffs went into effect, they raised prices in their stores. Trump was furious. He was screaming at them, "How dare you are to do that? No, you have to absorb this." Okay, that was just a 2 or 3 retailers, so it didn't go big into discussions and policies and so on. So it didn't go much at all. Now, in this situation is very different, because now it affects almost all cars made in US, made in Canada. It doesn't matter. It will affect the total prices. So now it's unproductive for Canada to beat things themselves. What's it going to say? That 35 is too much? Give us 25? No. Give us 5? No. We don't care. You can impose any, even 500% tariffs. It doesn't affect Canadians. It affects your consumers, your importers. We have nothing to do with that. That's where Canada stands.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about tariffs and who bears the burden of tariffs. Okay, let's talk as an example of Canada. My understanding is the current rate on Canada, because we haven't reached an agreement, is 35%. That's my understanding. Okay, and in addition to that, across the board, tariffs are 50% on steel and aluminum. That's across the board, no matter which country. And part of that is because it's deemed to be part of our national security, need, if you will. We can debate it, but that's what it is. Now, let's talk about what happens. If there's going to be a 35% tariff on something that we import, typically goods, not services, goods from Canada, then the question is who's going to bear that cost, right? It's either going to, if it's something that's being sold directly to the consumer, then the consumer is going to bear that cost to the extent that the price is not otherwise adjusted for the product. It's a 35% on top of whatever the price is. Secondly, to the extent that that the product is being shipped to a company, as you know, then the company is going to bear that cost. Okay. As long as the product, the total price is competitive with regard to what alternatives are, then they're going to have to bear that unless they want to eat part of it. Part of the question is that when you have a 35% tariff on the goods that you're paying that you didn't have to pay before, is that product still competitive, or do you have alternative sources to be able to get the same or similar product where you can pay less? In the final analysis, corporations have duties of loyalty to their shareholders, not to their country, rightly or wrongly, and therefore they're going to look on where they can get the best price with acceptable quality, and they're not as concerned about whether or not that's Canada or Mexico or or Taiwan or whatever in the normal course. So the real question is, what type of products are we talking about? To what extent do we have alternatives? To what extent, are the producers willing to eat part of the cost? To what extent are the purchasers willing to eat part of the cost? And then to what extent is it going to be passed on through additional prices to consumers? But there's no free lunch. I mean, you're going to have to somehow pay for it in some way. We just don't know what the mix is going to be. And frankly, the mix is going to depend upon what the product is and what the alternatives are. Sasha, please, sir.
Well, Canada is now going to put retaliatory
tariff, okay,
tariffs, especially on something what hurts United States. It's electricity, it's water, it's timber, it's many products that U.S. badly needs from Canada, and Canada will strike right there. Canada is also very active to find consumers for Canadian industrial products, steel, and just name it, because essentially Canadian economy is built very similar to U.S. and it can produce almost anything whatever U.S. Can produce, except a stealth bomber and maybe a few other missiles. Other than that, industrially, Canada is very advanced country. And Europeans and Chinese and Asian businessmen, they are now in great talks with Canada about acquiring their products and their expertise. And therefore, United States is becoming less and less important for the Canadian economy. And soon it will become a non-factor at all.
But Sasha, help me understand. They'll go to Rick. Who's not artificial intelligence? He's real intelligence. But in any event, Sasha, help me understand. You're talking about retaliatory actions, which would be more like surcharges for certain things, all right? Not tariffs, because as you said before, if you impose tariffs on U.S. imports, then your consumers are going to have to bear part of that. Right. So what you're talking about is not tariffs. You're talking about things that we might rely upon, okay?
Yes.
Timber, electricity, not a tariff, but to raise the price. In other words, create a certain, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's but see, what you're doing is you're doing it on a strategic basis.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, in theory, that's what you should do, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Canada's taken an approach. It's not going to be tit for tit and tax for tax. It's going to be, okay, you are doing a very unfriendly action against your long-standing friend. So let's not more talk about friendship. It's all in the past. Right now, it's a pure business. So you are doing this and this and that, and we are going to do this and this and that, and we'll go from there. Good luck. That's all.
I hear you. Rick.
So I've got the White House is putting out these charts showing tens of billions of dollars of tariff revenue.
Yeah.
And is that money going anyplace special, or is it just being used?
The Treasury. It goes to the Treasury. It goes to the general fund. It's not earmarked for. It's not earmarked for any particular purpose, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, because like
not paying down the debt.
Okay, but like, are consumers eventually? Is Trump going to be? I mean, you can't predict the future, but when consumers start paying a ton more for stuff,
that's right,
they're going to start saying we need some bonus checks back from the government.
No, I get emails all the time saying, do I want a Doge check? In other words, for the money that they allegedly saved, which is a very small fraction of what they claimed. Okay, do I want my share of that check? Do I want a tariff check? Do I want a check for my share of the additional revenues that we're collecting because of tariffs? And the answer is hell no for both, because we're running the deficit of close to $2 trillion a year, and these things aren't coming close to closing the gap. So look, the real question is, Rick, and all of you have raised this, is to what extent, I mean, what are the ultimate tariffs going to be? All right, what are the ultimate tariffs going to be, and to what extent are they going to affect consumer prices? All right. And the answer is it's a facts and circumstances situation depending upon what the product is and whether or not there are alternatives that are available at a more reasonable price when you consider the total cost, of which the tariff is only one piece of the total cost. And we don't know, and that's one of the reasons the Federal Reserve has rightly or wrongly waited to lower interest rates, because right now we don't have an economic growth problem with 3% the last quarter. Right now we don't have a major employment problem, even though they did adjust, job growth down significantly, but it was still positive. It wasn't negative. Okay. And by the way, the biggest negative in job growth is the government, because they're trying to right size the government, right?
Do you think these tariffs really have a chance of creating jobs in America to any significant extent?
Well, the tariffs by themselves don't, but the deals that are done in exchange for the tariffs might. For example, additional investment, commitment to build, facilities in the United States. In addition to that, let's take NATO. NATO countries have agreed to spend 5% of their GDP. Hopefully Canada is part of that. Sasha, you can come back and tell me if they are or not. They're obviously part of NATO, but they've agreed to spend, over the next several years to get up to 5% of GDP for defense spending. Before it was 2%, and not all the countries are even meeting the 2%, right? That will probably help U.S. defense contractors, because they're going to have to buy more weapon systems, if you will, and there are alternatives. I mean, you got BAE in the UK, but most of the major defense contractors in the world are in the United States, to the extent that you're talking about Western providers.
David, will the effect of tariffs increase inflation in the United States and have a decrease in profits by companies, because the consumer is going to have a choice, either pay more for the same good or don't buy the good? Are we going to see a stagflation take place in the U.S. because of these tariffs?
That's a possibility. Okay. The fact is, as I said, it's facts and circumstances. What is the product? How important is the product? To what extent can you substitute other products, that have no tariffs or less tariffs, if you will? Let me give you an example. Okay. Let's take automobiles. To the extent that you're talking about high-end automobiles, such as Porsche, Audi, Mercedes, high-end automobiles, the people that typically buy those cars, could probably absorb the additional cost. All right.
Mhm.
But to the extent that you're talking about, mainstream America, okay, or any place else where they're more price sensitive, then it could end up having an effect on their willingness and ability to buy a car as frequently as otherwise they would buy the car. One of the things that Nick, that was in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which, by the way, exacerbated our fiscal challenge, but was you can deduct interest on an auto loan, up to a limit. And that might be one way that the administration's trying to deal with, the potential additional costs of buying a car that could be associated with the fact that we import a lot of things from Canada, right? Dealing with the automotive industry. But by the way, Sasha, has Canada agreed to spend 5% of GDP on defense?
Yeah, Canada is looking into it. However, Canada looks also on other things. For example, you're familiar with the NORAD, which is
very familiar. It's in Colorado. Yeah.
A lot of installations are being based in Canada, and for many years, I think some cases 40, maybe 50 years. So Canada is interested to collect rent on these facilities that are being allocated in Canada. And in the future, of course, it will continue, so it wants to collect rent as well. So maybe that also being part of whatever Canada will contribute in this 5% deal. Also, I would like to mention that Canada provides a lot of direct help to Ukraine and Ukrainians, which is not even covered by this 5% or 2% or whatever it might be.
No.
Yeah, Dr. Sharif.
Yeah, Honorable David Walker, I want to focus on creating the job. According to my understanding, definitely I learned a lot through this Spot TV. I learned a lot through all of my American friends last 15 years. As I work with talent economy, I work with wisdom. So all of the talented people last 50 years, they go to USA, they build up Silicon Valley, they build up all of the big things. It's not only US people, all of the global talented people from around the world, their destinations was USA. And because of Trump, now many of my students, talented people, young people, they are not sure their interest about USA. But I believe that in this immigrant, the talents, and all of the big company, actually beauty of US economy. Do you believe through this immigration policy and they demotivating the talent, USA may lose their leaderships? What's your thoughts? What's your views? Or I'm very, very interested to know more about talent strategy.
Well, first, the United States is a lot more than one individual. And Trump is obviously a controversial figure. He's a figure where people either love him or they hate him. There's not much in between. Okay. The Republicans in the Congress, in my opinion, are too blindly following what he wants. On the other hand, the Democrats in the Congress, in my opinion, are blindly opposing whatever he wants. And I think they're both wrong. Okay. And I think that, the other thing you have to keep in mind is that Trump cannot run again, no matter what people say. The Constitution makes it clear, you can only have 2 full terms, and therefore he can't run again. And so he's a temporary player. He's had a major impact on the Republican Party. no question about it. He's changed the Republican Party, but there's only one Donald Trump. All right, and as far as opportunity, America is the land of opportunity. I mean, there's no question about that. And I think a lot of the things that that Trump is doing, are designed to promote more economic growth and more domestic production. Not just with regard to material, but also resources, natural resources, energy, etc. And you have to look at the whole portfolio. It's not just the tariff issue; it's the tax policy, it's the regulatory policy. It's spending more on investment, less on consumption. My personal view is that one of the things that we need to do on immigration, one of many, is we should be doing everything that we can to try to attract in the best and brightest here, whether it be through our universities or otherwise. Okay. And if they've got the kind of knowledge and skills that we need to make sure that they've got a track to permanent legal status, and in appropriate circumstances, a track to citizenship. Okay. I do think that we need comprehensive immigration reform that is based more on the economic needs of the nation, okay, and the competitiveness of our nation as it relates to the global economic Olympics that we're in. That's not what we have right now, and but it's what we need. Yeah.
Right.
Trump fired the lady who
BLS.
BLS.
Does the job math. So if he starts putting out garbage numbers, will private industry, like the Wall Street Journal, for instance, start putting out its own estimates of what the true jobs picture is?
Wow.
Well, first, BLS is in the Labor Department. It is a presidential appointment. He does have the authority to do that. BLS is supposed to be strictly nonpartisan. Probably the two biggest statistics that people, look at from BLS are the unemployment and the employment numbers and cost of living, the cost of living numbers. As I said, there have been some significant adjustments from the original estimate. I think that needs to be looked into as to why there have been such significant adjustments recently. At the same point in time, I think it's absolutely critically important that the person that has that job be highly qualified, nonpartisan, non-ideological, just like the Comptroller General of the United States needs to be. I mean, you need to call it as you see it, tell it like it is, just the facts, nothing but the facts, and hopefully that's the kind of person that will be nominated. And hopefully the Senate, which has a responsibility to confirm anybody who's nominated, will make sure that it is somebody who has those types of attributes and is a person of unquestioned not only ability, but also an important word that I use quite frequently that's not used enough is called integrity.
Yeah, just as a point of interest in our area with the BLS, when it comes to retirement plans, we actually have to look at the BLS statistics. And they publish statistics, what standard industrial classification group retires and at what age. Why is that important? We have to use age 62 or 65 as normal retirement age, unless there are statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows the demographic group retires earlier than that. Point in case, we work with the National Football League. We did some consulting years ago. They retire earlier. The average person in the NFL lasts approximately 3 years, and almost none of them go past age 30. Same with the NBA. We did some consulting with them. Same thing. But that's because the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out demographics for us to show when people retire. Now, what about medical doctors, which represent about half our clients? None of them retire earlier than age 62. No group. So it's kind of interesting to see the sports figures will retire early. But if they start messing around with these statistics, it'll be brutal on the retirement planning industry because we actually rely heavily on BLS statistics. So that's just
On that real quickly, a little bit of humor. I have tendonitis in my right shoulder that I've gotten through playing too much pickleball, which is the fastest growing sport in America. And I was told by my orthopedic doctor that I'm not going to be able to be a professional pitcher in Major League Baseball now. So I was really disappointed with that. But
your career has been cut short. I do understand.
But can you become a professional pickleball player and everything like that?
I wasn't planning on making a living on it.
You know, it sounds like it's a fun game from what I've heard and everything.
Oh, that's great.
I did have a quick question to you based on something you were talking to Steve about earlier and everything, because I saw Alyssa Slotkin, I believe is her name, and everything on one of the talk shows, and she was saying that the Democrats need to get back on a message, because apparently she's feeling, and I guess that she's one of those moderate Democrats, that they are not on message and not doing enough around economic issues, and that if they don't get on message, that they will, as you just said, lose possibly the midterms and definitely the 2028 election. So I just wanted your thoughts on her as a person that the Democrats need to listen to, because she does seem like she's more of a moderate than, say, the AOCs and some of the other ones. But I did see her, might have been on Stephen Colbert, saying that they need to get back on message and that they had gotten off message.
Well, I think she's right. I think the energy in the party is the far left. The people that are getting all the press attention in the Democratic Party are Democrat socialists. And that's not the mainstream of America. I mean, if that's what people view as the head of the Democratic Party, the Democrats are in deep trouble. As we talked about earlier in the call, the Democrats need to look for people like Andy Beshear and Josh Shapiro, for the next presidential race. The Democrats, they're leaderless right now. They don't really have anybody. I mean, even the vice president, which he was, the former Vice President Harris, asked who's the leader of the Democratic Party. She couldn't say and didn't want to say. But by the way, it's not her. I think the other issue is they need to have an agenda. As I said before, the Republicans are too blindly following what Trump wants, and the Democrats are too blindly opposing anything that Trump wants. They're both wrong. Rick?
So I just want to talk about math people versus being politicized. I'm a math guy. You're a math guy. Nick's a math. Sasha, we're all math people. And I think for the most part, we don't like politics. We're impatient with it.
That's
the
fair.
only reason I started paying attention was because my job in TV was writing jokes about it. I preferred my previous ignorant state. And when I was in college, I was taking math courses, physics courses. Half the people at Harvard are in STEM. I don't think you get particularly politicized if you're a math science person. It's not where your interests lie, and it's not where your professors' interests lie. And I think that, people who do STEM are not freaking overly politicized.
Well, Rick, didn't we do a study on that? You told me how many actuaries are in Congress today?
0.
How many lawyers?
177.
Way too many. How many
Case
CPAs?
closed. Case
I don't know.
closed.
I guess there are 20 CPAs, but let me look it up.
Can you imagine? There's no actuaries in Congress.
But
There's 177 lawyers.
speaking of actuaries, we did a recording of the radio show. It may say Online Dinner Party on it, but the show that will run at 2:00 is actually a woman that is bringing math and movement together. So she's using movement to get our kids into math and everything like that.
Wait, I've got an answer for this.
And that show will be at 2:00, and she's an actuary. So
Actuary, all right. We got an actuary on our show. Yeah.
So I was way off. There are 6 out of 500 some people in Congress. 6 of them are CPAs.
And how many actuaries?
0. No actuaries.
Zero.
I don't know that an actuary is ever served.
Kind of amazing. And by the way, lawyers don't count as actuaries. I'll tell you why. Since I went to law school and I had a master's in law school, so I went twice. And I asked them, well, why didn't you get into engineering or math? Guess what? They were all bad at engineering and math, all of them. So that's the reason they went to law school. They were good at English.
But let's talk about what it takes to become an actuary. If you remember the SATs that you took to get into high school, you have to take 10 of those over a period of several years. 10 all-day exams at increasing levels of intricacy and knowledge to become an actuary. It's the most professionally demanding field in the world.
It's a harder test than the bar exam. It's harder than the CPA exam, harder than the CFA exam. It's the hardest exam in the United States, is the actuarial exams.
The actuarial exam is by far the most difficult. You have ASAs and you have FSAs. ASAs, you have to pass 5 exams. FSAs, you have to pass 10. It's by far the most difficult exam. But actuaries typically don't have real external personalities, which you need to have in order to be in politics, rightly or wrongly. Okay. And secondly, the CPA exam, I would argue, CPA and CFA are clearly much, much harder than the bar exam, much harder. Okay. Not as hard as the actuarial exam, but much harder than the bar exam.
Yeah, it took my dad 5 tries to pass all 5 parts of the CPA exam. It's
but what we have is mathematically adverse selection in Congress. You have a math problem. You have several math problems: Social Security, Medicare, and of course the budget and the deficit. And you have no one, not one person who's qualified to solve a basic math problem, David. And that's the real problem that you have. In other words, you got a mathematically challenged group of people trying to solve, which could be simple, future interest and equations. And, they just don't even have the background to do it. So they pass the buck to the next generation and they don't have it either. So what we do is we have this continuing cycle. Now, one problem I have with the Federal Reserve and bringing down interest rates is that 100 basis points interest on the debt makes a huge difference.
That's correct.
On how much we're paying in interest. So why isn't the Federal Reserve bringing down interest rates, if for any reason, to lower the interest rate on the national debt?
So there are highly educated people in Congress. Thomas Massie from Kentucky has a master's degree from MIT. Super smart guy, but also he's got like a crazy hobby horse. He comes from the mining industry. So all of his decisions are going to be informed by math on the one hand and what is good for mining on the other. Rand Paul, doctor of ophthalmology, has, on the one hand, really smart, on the other hand, really a crazy pain in the ass. So,
hey Rick, just really quickly, I know we only got a minute or two to go and everything, but I was just looking it up on AI, since we were talking about AI, and it says the number of actuaries in the U.S. Congress is not consistently tracked. However, you can learn about the general occupation of members of Congress, and y'all were right. Lawyers have been the largest occupational group in Congress, followed by businessmen and bankers, which is the second largest category. And they did say that some members may have backgrounds in fields related to actuarial science, such as mathematics, statistics, economics, or business, but it's not common to find a member of Congress whose primary professional background is as a practicing actuary. So they're not.
Rick, the 2 members that you mentioned voted against the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Because they're smart. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Because they figured out the math. The math was bad, and the rest of the Congress didn't get it.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, let me mention, I know we're almost done, but I want to mention this. We may want to continue this conversation in the future. I have more and more people that are concerned that Congress may not act until we have a debt crisis. And so while I will do everything I can to try to avoid that, because I think that not only would be disastrous for the United States, but for the world, I've started focusing also as a supplement to avoiding that, what a debt crisis would look like in terms that the American people can understand and would be really concerned about. And secondly, what kinds of things should we do if we have a debt crisis that represents things that otherwise we should have done a long time ago, but couldn't for some reason or wouldn't for some reason, and is consistent with the concept of never let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah, and we are going to have to examine that. We're out of time now, but it's going to happen within the next decade, within the next 10 years. It does affect all of our financial plans because we usually do 10-year projections. I know Congress does no projections at all, but it's really important for personal finance to look at your situation now and 10 years from now. And we're finding a big problem within about year 7. We'll see you next week on Economics with Honorable David M. Walker.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.